Well, welcome everybody. My name is Allison Madison with Wisconsin Saltwise. Wisconsin Saltwise is a coalition of organizations from across the state that are working together to reduce salt pollution into our lakes, streams, and drinking water. And one of the ways that we are tackling that is by providing a platform for leaders that are really changing winter maintenance to tell their stories and help inspire others to see that there are really better ways to do winter maintenance and salting. So I'm very excited today to be able to allow Casey Olson and Wayne Rayfield from American Family Insurance to talk about the work that they've been doing on their Madison campus and work that I think is inspiring some changes on other American Family campuses across the country, as well as really changing the way that contractors in the Madison area are doing their work. So with that, I will pass it off to Casey and Wayne. If you have any questions, please type those into the YouTube chat and I will moderate those questions at the end.
Thanks, Allison. Well, my name is Wayne Rayfield and I'm American Family's Facilities Land Management Administrator. And as you alluded to a little bit, we not only have multiple sites in Madison and Wisconsin, we actually deal with some sites in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, Denver, Colorado, and Phoenix. Obviously, Phoenix doesn't get any snow, so they're not really part of this program, but we've introduced it to them as well. And I'm going to let Casey, well, let me just stop a second here. I actually lead the land management strategy and all the strategic initiatives we have with our land. It's landscaping, it's native areas, it's the Saltwise, the winter maintenance activities we do. And then we also help with the contracts with contractors for our landscape maintenance. And we also have a blended model where we have some employees that also do our land management, maintenance, and so forth. Casey, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Casey Olson. I am a facilities program analyst. I work closely with Wayne at American Family and with our facilities asset planning. So we want to understand how we can best manage for our assets as well as the ecosystem on our campuses, as well as the area around them. So in my position, when it comes to salt savings and Saltwise, do a lot of the salt tracking with contractors and site mappings in order to understand how much salt we're putting down each winter, so that we can find those reduction areas.
Thanks, Casey. Yeah, so why are we doing this? Well, again, I mentioned before, we're involved with our strategy for land management. And probably back in around 2015, we came up with our land management strategy, which basically was 4 big pillars. And you can see that in the clover leaf there, that we had with multiple input from our staff across the portfolio, again, not just in Wisconsin. We came up with these pillars basically around technology and innovation, ecosystems management, education, and creating awareness in our communities, and then landscape design and management, how we manage our sites and so forth. So out of that, we felt that the ecosystem was, vital to our communities and the people we work with. And by doing that, I also was a landscape contractor for many years as a landscape architect and was aware of the Saltwise program, but never was really involved with it. But back in 2000, then as we developed the strategy, I started to realize Saltwise was a thing, and then became more actively involved in that. And there was just 2 of us back in, I think it was 2016 or 17, that got certified with Saltwise. And then we started to expand it a little bit more and brought other team members in. But not only that, we were involved with other alliances like the Clean Lakes Alliance, we were actually part of the Hara Water Rivershed inaugural boot camp they had. We also became involved with CARPC's Starkweather Creek Chloride Reduction Steering Committee, and then of course the Saltwise program. So that's a little bit of the history there. Just realizing that this all made sense, and that's why we kind of got into it. Go ahead, Casey. Before Saltwise, we weren't perfect. Realizing that we were putting down probably more product than we were supposed to, and then obviously once we got trained in it, figuring out that yeah, this was these were not right ways to apply salt. So it was important that we learned that, and then held people accountable for it, and then actually perform cleanups when we started seeing situations like this. So yeah, once we got into the Saltwise and decided, we were going to be part of this, there was a few steps we decided to take. We felt we weren't a contractor, right? So it's a little different than a lot of the people that are in Saltwise. We're a business managing our property and managing our contractors. So we felt that, we had to do something a little different. Well, basically, we went out and got trained, not only ourselves, but we have 2 different contractors we work with in Madison area, and bringing them all together on the same platform at the same time was important. So we were all on the same page. Obviously, Saltwise training gives us the same message, but we felt that if we were together as a team, going forward with this, it helped clear up any questions and help make a level plane for everybody to start with. I get the question all the time, well, an insurance company and you want to reduce salt, well, what about risk? And before we even ventured into this, I was asked this by our upper management and risk assessment. Well, if you're going to reduce salt, we're going to have more exposure and create risk, and potentially people get hurt. And bottom line is, could be paid out in insurance claims. And that's the last thing we want. But we actually said, okay, well, we're going to start tracking that. And actually, after we got into Saltwise and reduced the salt, we're actually even seeing less falls just because we're more aware of surfaces and really being honed in on the areas that potentially might refreeze and that kind of thing, and what that's all about and how we manage that. So we also, like I said, we get the contractors in, and we created a baseline year for salt usage, just because we had no idea what we were using because we weren't actually tracking. And then we all started to implement Saltwise verbiage into contracts for multiple year contracts. And again, we've actually spread this out actually to Minnesota, in St. Joseph, Missouri, and in Denver. So even though there really isn't a Saltwise program, there is in Minnesota under a different name, but in Missouri and Denver, there's not, but we've moved it into our facilities and our properties. And this is being kind of a baseline year right now, but they have all been trained and moving forward. We also felt it was important to have internal checks and balances with the program to ensure that people are being calibrated, that people are procuring the proper products every year, and doing site checks, not only before and after the season, but like right during a storm and right after the storm event, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And we call this governance, kind of a fancy way of saying, well, how are you going to manage the program? Well, it's through a governance program where we do have these checks and balances, and then we audit these at the end of the season. Go ahead, Case. And then in the preseason, we actually update every year any snow maps we have. And this is our Madison American Parkway site here. And where Casey is really involved is on the GIS mapping of our sites. We just don't take a Google map. We actually have some GIS maps that we actually mark up and then change as need be, depending on the season and or depending on the year and depending on COVID and so forth. We've had to have some changes. We've shut down areas and just make sure that we have that preseason kickoff to make sure that everybody understands what we're plowing, what's closed, what's open, and so forth. And maybe I'll let Casey elaborate a little bit more on the GIS side.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Like Wayne said, we use a program called ArcGIS. Basically, I've been able to map all of our facilities for landscaping and hardscaping assets in order to understand what we have in square footages or acreage, so that we can make data-driven decisions on what's going on. How it affects our winter salting and plowing. As you can see here, there's a map that shows our open areas and our closed areas. During COVID, we realized that we're not going to have very many people in the offices. So we do have to keep our ramps clear, as that's where people park the most, as well as we don't want snow on top of our ramps. But our main parking lots that are just surface lots, we realized we could close in order to reduce the salt that was being put down in those areas. A lot of the other spaces that were closed were just in order to reduce the amount of salt in our patios and spaces like that. But overall, the mapping is just a very accurate way of understanding where our contractors are going to be putting salt in order to understand how much salt is being put in those spaces at the end of the day.
Yeah, and then we're accurately, we can calculate the pounds per square foot, or slice and dice the numbers any way we want once we have those. So each of those spaces, whether it be a sidewalk, a roadway, or parking lot, we've got attributes for square footages on them, like Casey said, that we can easily calculate any and all of those spaces of the square footage versus the pounds. And then we have our contractors report the poundages that they put down for each individual spaces as well. And it's a lot of data, and that's where Casey comes in and really has a really good job with that. But it's important to us to know where our maybe some higher areas are and potentially where areas are for improvement, which we've always improved, and there's always still room for improvement. So again, having the data and having maps with square footages and having correct data was crucial to that. And through the process of doing the checks and balances and having proper reporting was one of the number one things we strove for to get this. Okay, next slide, please. So, and then, like I mentioned before, during the season, we have part of the governance program that checks and balance is that we have site checks by the facilities management where we actually check for the product being used and at the desired rates. Response time, now that's not necessarily salt wise, but it is when it's based on temperature and so forth, but we have our own internal time that our ramps and everything needs to be cleared by. And then following specific site requirements. For instance, here, this is the top of one of our ramps. We do some pre-treatments by our in-house staff to help reduce the bonding of the snow and actually help reduce the amount of time spent up there, because the ramps are older. They have weight requirements, and some of these plow trucks are right at that. We don't let them go over that, but they come right up to the weight requirement. And we just don't like them to be lingering on the ramps a long time. So again, we want them to get in, get out, get it done. We've had significant wear and tear over our ramps over the last 20, 30 years. And we found a lot of that's due to weight and the chlorides that weren't being managed correctly years ago. Next slide, please.
Yeah, one other thing during the season is we do ask our contractors and in-house staff to do bi-monthly data submission of salt, so we can stay up to date with those numbers and see how we're doing during that season, as well as if there is problem areas, we can fix it sooner rather than later.
And then the postseason, we always do a postseason walkthrough to determine any damage and to make sure we find people accountable. Again, if there's any hiding salt in there that got missed, that maybe got dumped out, that's cleaned up at the same time. And making sure that the final salt data is submitted within 2 weeks of the last event. And again, like Casey mentioned, that's an ongoing, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it's a requirement that not only are they submitting the salt during the season, but every 2 weeks to stay on top of that data. Because if anybody's ever been involved with the salt and the winter maintenance activities, we all know that one storm, except for this year, it's been a lot easier with the lack of snow. But we've all found that one snowstorm kind of blends into the next. And then if you don't do the data submission and do all your paperwork right away, they tend to blend together, and it's harder to get that accurate data. We find that the damage walkthrough, again, holds people accountable. Again, as an owner, if there's damage that wasn't there before the season, in our walkthrough, making sure we address it right away after the season or as soon as we find it. This was just a little mishap with I think a snow blower or something hit the top of the retaining wall and knocked over part of it, which we quickly got fixed with our contractor. And then we schedule those repairs as soon as we can. Again, really not part of the SaltWise process, but something we added in just to make sure everything got cleaned up. And then our ramps and at the postseason, we have those cleaned. We used to flush the ramps pre-SaltWise, but now we actually have a contractor that goes in and actually extracts the debris into bags, and then they're properly disposed of. So not only the road debris, but any chlorides that were still left in the concrete gets extracted from them and then properly disposed of.
Next, we can kind of look at results using all these SaltWise techniques and other internal governances. We've been able to see results over the last couple of years of major declines. We did, after getting all of our contractors and site teams certified in 2019, we had a baseline year set in that 2018-2019 season. As you can see, there's about 615 tons of salt that was put down during that year. And with that, we wanted to see reductions after the SaltWise training was completed in the off season, which we did. In the first season, we saw about a 39% reduction compared to that baseline year. Just understand, and the way that we compared that was also looking at the Wisconsin DOT's winter severity index for Dane County. Because all of our sites are in Dane County, we were using the winter severity index in order to look at year over year rather than just look at snow accumulation or events or just one area. We wanted to look at all of that combined. So looking at then that base year, we saw that 39% reduction in our first year, and then a 57% reduction in the second year compared to that first saving for that's the 2018-2019 season. We also saw some savings in our operational and infrastructure areas, just in the amount of salt that was reduced, as well as the amount of, if we're putting less salt down, we're saving on the amount of concrete that is being eroded, as well as other infrastructure that might be damaged, such as turf grass or with salt spraying off the roads. The one other thing that we saw a lot of reductions in, and we got some thanks for, was in our entryways. The cleaning staff did not have to clean nearly as much salt coming off of boots that were coming from people walking into the buildings. So that was a big savings there. Overall, it was about a 50% reduction over the first 2 years, and we're looking to see another savings year in this season. When it comes to the winter severity index, just if people are not not familiar with it, using that Wisconsin DOT severity index, they break down using the calibers of the duration of the storm and time, the accumulation of snow, the number of events as of snow or freezing rain events, and then the number of incidents such as drifting or refreeze that are added up. So all of that goes into the winter severity index in order to understand how each season is compared to one another. And with
yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize this, that we not only track the winter severity index, but also the snow totals, because, you know, when we first started seeing other people that were comparing, you know, showing their salt savings, we felt, well, we could even take it a little step further to represent how severe was the winter and what was the total amount of snowfall. Because it really, I mean, you can say you save salt, but, you know, you got to make something to compare it to. And we felt that winter severity index and the total snowfall was very important, that, you know, told us that, you know, we're on the right track there. So
the easiest place for definitely that we saw the major reduction right away was the fact that the 2018-19 and the 2019-2020 season for severity index was pretty much the same, within a point of each other, but we saw that very about 40% reduction in salt. So just in 1 year with proper salt waste training of our contractors and site teams, we saw some major reductions in salt, which has provided a lot of insight to what we can do better in the future.
exactly. And then, like I said earlier, we've rolled this out at other sites here, and we're anxious to see how those numbers start to roll out as the next year or two moving forward, to see how that works. And we've applied the same process on the same contract verbiage, you know, and the same recording of the data and so forth at these other sites as well. You know, and again, being not a contractor, but being a business manager or owner, we felt it was really important to, you know, make this commitment, not only to us, but to the community, realizing that, you know, the salt really, over salting can run off into the storm sewers and potentially into our waterways, our wells, into the lakes, the Yahara River watershed, and specifically in Madison. And realizing that, again, we have a bigger initiative that we're a part of, is that our corporate responsibility, as I mentioned earlier, commitment to our community, environment, and people, and felt this was just a perfect fit for that, you know, when we first got involved with it, not even realizing how far this might reach for us. But and I think that's a real opportunity for any other businesses or landowners or business or, you know, building owners, that to really to look at this not from the contractor side, but from your ownership side. And I think it's starting to catch on with other people, but we're excited to be, you know, to help and lead that. And also, you know, if people want to reach out to us, we definitely would encourage that if they have questions, you know, from being an owner or a business side of it.
All right. I seem to have frozen right now. Wayne and Casey, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but it is very robotic.
Oh no. Okay, let me try one thing. Stay on the Zoom. I'm going to go out. Can you ask people to type in questions they have into the chat?
Yeah, if anyone wants to type in questions in the chat, we will feel free. We will we'll go into those as Allison comes back in.
So yeah, and again, we as an owner, business owner, the key thing to our success, another key thing, is that partnership with snow contractors who are actually part of SaltWise and went through the training. And then it's that partnership, you know, again, we're helping drive that, but again, we have to have good partnership with the people we do work with, and specifically those contractors. And she's back.
All right. Is that better?
Yep, that's better.
Okay. My computer sometimes has a mind of its own. Great. Well, I'm just so astounded every time I hear your story. Thank you for sharing. I hope we get a few questions to show up in the chat here. We did have somebody chime in and say you just answered their question. So we do have an active audience. I guess while people are maybe thinking of their questions, wanted to ask Wayne, I think you had mentioned that slips and falls actually went down after using less salt. So I was wondering, I do know that liability is always a question that comes up, always a perceived barrier, right? That if we start using less salt, we're going to have more slips and falls, we're going to have lawsuits. So could you talk a little bit about, how do you think it was possible to both reduce salt use and have slips and falls go down?
Well, I will say it was very low anyway to start with. And I can't say for sure, if there may have been some that happened that weren't reported. Obviously, these are ones that just were reported. So, and secondly, the year it went down, we started into COVID. But again, we still have a fair amount of staff that had to go into the buildings to operate the buildings, and then some divisions that were there and kind of spread out. So yeah, I don't know, again, I think we were more aware once we had the training. There's definitely some areas that were more prone to refreeze or, develop ice that maybe run off from the roof or that kind of thing, that we started to really hone in on a little bit more, and being aware to recheck those areas, just because, we didn't want to use overabundance of salt, but we knew we had to be, proactive on those areas. And we might have done a little extra pre-treatment on it with a liquid treatment. And just being aware of that, we definitely were still, safety was number one. And that was, we were very aware of that going into the whole program, that we could not go into it, increasing the chance of people falling. So I think it just heightened the awareness around this and made us more, like I said, more aware of any potential areas that would refreeze any ice and snow. But we also encourage people, hey, dress properly and wear the appropriate footwear when you're coming into the buildings, during an event or right, before or after, just to take a little onus on yourselves.
How did you get that message out? So it sounds like I'm hearing both. Just more attention was being paid to winter maintenance, especially at those problem areas, but also you said there's some education for staff. How did you help educate your staff around this? Well,
we actually had a member of your team actually did one of our lunch and learns a year or two ago. I think in our first year really starting this, Catherine did a lunch and learn around Saltwise, and it was, also, put out from there that people need to be aware that we're doing this and take some ownership of winter themselves. And then we also did some internal, some signage and just awareness with internal type media that we have in AmFam.
We have our main screen when you go into a like Google format is an AmFam screen, and we can put announcements there. So one of the things is we worked with our media team in order to put out announcements at the beginning of winter, basically to show where those closures are so people aren't confused why lots are closed, and then also talk about Saltwise practices and how to be smart when it comes to coming into the building.
Right, thank you. It does look like we've got a question here from Kevin in the chat. He's asking, have you been pleased with the anti-icing brine results?
Yeah, we have, and we've used it in various ways. Here in Madison, we're just pre-treating the ramps and some major entrance ways, and we've definitely noticed not so much salt is needed to really even after the event, after we've pushed the snow off. It just requires less salt altogether. In Eden Prairie, Minnesota, this is the first year that they're totally into the program, but their contractor up there actually bought a pre-treatment applicator for the roads and parking lots. So it'd be interesting to see how this comes out after this season. But yes, overall, we've been very pleased with it, and we've done it in various ways, like with the UTV you saw in the PowerPoint, and then even just using little packs for spraying around entrances and so forth.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. Does look like a few people are just like a minute behind the live stream. So I'll just wait a little bit here for any more questions that might come in. And while we do that, I'm just gonna put a reminder out there that this webinar is part of a monthly series. So we have webinars every first Wednesday at noon, and next month will be on salt-wise water softeners. So actually looking at some technologies that are able to deal with scale from hard water without using salt, without using the ion exchange softeners that are kind of conventional right now. So I'll put a plug in for that. I don't see any other questions popping in, but like I said, I know we're a little behind. So I know Wayne and Casey have their emails on the slide here, so you can feel free to reach out to them. And you can always also just respond to the email with the link, and I can connect you with them as well. We are hoping to put together maybe later this spring, even an event in the Madison area to bring together other property managers that would like to sit down with Casey and Wayne and maybe pick their brain a little bit more in person and potentially look at rewriting your own contracts to be able to ask any contractors that you work with as a property manager to kind of step up their game and also adopt Solway's practices. Okay, we have someone, Jim said, great presentation. Kevin did pop on again, said, Wayne, if you get your contractors to brine the roads and lots, it will really cut the salt usage.
Okay.
So
that's a great comment, because we don't currently do that. But we realize that's another potential to do that we could potentially go to soon. We've definitely made improvements, but there's definitely room for improvement to keep going that way. And we realize that, and that's why having multiple sites and going about it a little differently with the same motivation to do it, to reduce the salt basically, and go on through the same training. And that makes it really exciting to see what those are. But again, but we really want, we can improve.
I say another notion is the fact that we are property managers, and it is up to those contractors to kind of take that initiative. We can ask and try to push, but sometimes contractors don't have the equipment or and things like that. So we try to do as much as we can in-house with the equipment we have. But when we are really managing those sidewalks with our internal staff, and doing as much brine treatment we can, we can only get to so much. So it's just kind of obviously the contractor in Prairie took it on themselves to do that. So it's up to them sometimes.
Yeah, and Jim did echo what you just said, that brine is tied to temperatures and timing, which can be difficult. I think, yeah, when you are doing your own brining on site, it's right there, you can put it down. That's one thing. When you've got a contractor that needs to come across town, and like the timing before storms, and a lot more variables get introduced. We did have another question that came up. Where do you get your brine from?
Well, we've We actually get it from a green earth product. It's a cryotech product. They're the distributor in the area. I think they're out of Fond du Lac. So it's just not straight salt brine. It actually is a brine with some calcium and magnesium in it. And it's a little more expensive, but the high use areas we put them in, we've had, wear and tear over the years, and we decided to use a little bit more, not just a brine, but a little bit safer even yet with the brine itself. And we've had good luck with it. It was just getting used to how it responds to temperature and so forth was a little bit of a learning curve. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I definitely could put you in touch with our representative at Green Earth Products. And I know that they also have some high-tech stuff that the airports use, which is really expensive. But I got their contact actually from a gentleman that I grew up with, basically, that used to help manage the Dane County Regional Airport. And they still use that product for de-icing products on the planes. And again, it's not that product we use, but they have those higher end airport or type products they use on the planes and the runways.
And Kevin did make a note in the chat here that I should have a flow chart for brining. So I do have a flow chart that was developed by Matt Whittam from the town of Lynn that he has shared in previous webinars. So if anybody's interested in getting more information kind of into the specifics of the use of brine, the temperature, different weather conditions, I can share that out. And I can also give the link. I think it's on our website. I wanted to ask one question. I don't think here just came up as you were talking. You guys mentioned brining the sidewalks with a backpack sprayer, right? Is that just kind of like a modified or like a pesticide sprayer? Is that what's used?
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, we just use it just as I think that our crew has a couple dedicated for it in the winter. Or you can just clean them out at the end of the year and reuse it with if you're doing any spraying outside for during the landscape season. But yes, it's exactly the same thing.
Okay, great. Well, that's pretty easy, right? And available for people who are interested.
Yeah, but the one we use on the UTV was a Snow X product that we use specifically for that. So that is a dedicated sprayer. We don't use that. We have other pull behind sprayers, for the, landscape maintenance, but that one's a dedicated one. But again, if it's the handheld and the backpack sprayers are just, landscape sprayers.
Okay. We do have a comment in here again about the idea that you guys could capture your own brine from water softeners. So I know we've got a few people doing that in the Madison area. And as I mentioned earlier on the call here with Casey and Wayne, I was able to visit Mike Gresh, who has been doing this in the Lucky building right in downtown Madison. And I know he's producing more brine than he can use. And he told me again yesterday, if there are people in the Madison area that want to kind of try out brine, and he's willing to give it away. If you can get yourself to the Lucky building, I know that's not going to work for everybody. And it really depends on your scale, but we do have a lot of innovative work that's happening around the city right now. And just so glad that Casey and Wayne could tell their story today. I think I'm gonna kind of pull together this webinar, but do want to thank everybody who's been able to join us. Please share the link out. This will be archived on our YouTube, so you can share this link out with your other contacts. And we appreciate your work to promote the awareness of this issue. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Right.